support who would like to support the New York position, that they wait to do that until they see the outcome of our position so that they can include both when they fill out their documents.
I would second that. It is not clear to me, and I know that this may not be politically correct, but it seems to me if there are 2 or 3 or 4 activities that are happening, stemming up from the grassroots, that we should be able to support more of them rather than fewer of them.
Yes, I agree.
And we have essentially 600 words of space to put suggestions in. So it's not impossible to do that. I think you just have to be aware of that. And also I would like to point out that the form isn't really due until March 1st. Now I don't advise you to wait till the last day, because you might encounter some problems with the online form. But if you don't have to do it tomorrow.
All right, Beth DeHaven, do you still have, yes, you do have your hand up. Go ahead, Beth.
Yes, I just had a general question about concurrence. I understand now the difference that with concurrence, you add to a position, you're not changing it. If you had to change the US position, you'd have to go to a study. But looking at what you're wanting to add, it seems like quite a bit. And so I'm just thinking, what is the decision factor when it comes to whether you're going to try to change it? Because I feel like adding on, and I guess I'd have to see the whole position then, but it seems like you're going to have a huge document after a while if you keep adding on. So just some commentary on that would be helpful to me.
It's 500
I
words.
think you're right in terms of the fact that it does make it a lengthier position, but it is a position where, like when you look at, say, the part on safe staffing, that allows you and any league throughout the country to then support that kind of a law. It's not a whole package that everybody has to use all in one. It has those components, and that's what makes it helpful to a lot of leagues. I think a lot of leagues don't have their own healthcare position. And I think also that when we look at this, we know that this National League, because it's something that we all agree on, is that voting rights and access to the polls are absolutely core issues. And we don't want to necessarily take resources from that to conduct a study. And don't forget, for those of you who maybe are just recent members of the league, it often takes 2 years and quite a lot of resources and staff, national staff time in order to conduct a study.
I would say that our entire edition is 500 words, so it fits on one page. And you can find it on our website. And, some positions run, 3 sentences, and some positions run 3 pages. And it kind of depends on how much you split up the issue into separate positions and how much you treat healthcare like one thing.
Barbara Pearson, would you like to add your comments now?
I would, except I'm writing somebody else's chat. So I think the biggest thing that people don't talk about, and I think it was so clear in the slides that Judy and Barb showed us, is that we don't have services where we need services. And one of the fallouts of having a profit-based system is that there are no services where you can't make a profit. So if we had democratic governance on our healthcare, they would be able to make system-wide decisions and not ones that require them to give more resources where there already are resources. And that's that's a huge piece of what could happen. The fact of having democratic governance of our healthcare instead of arbitrary decisions made by corporate executives whose job is to make as much money as they can. And they're making it where the money is. But then look at those maps. Look at all the places where you don't have maternity.
Yeah, one of the really dense places for doctors and hospitals is New York's Upper East Side. Now, I don't know if the rest of you know what New York Upper East Side is like, but it's got 10 years. It has a life expectancy that is higher than Japan's, and a, wealth per block, which would, scandalize anybody. And 10 blocks north, life expectancy drops 10 years because it was redlined. It's part of Harlem. And the per capita income is probably, what, 5%? Yes. Thank you, Barbara. Healthcare
you.
follows money.
Yeah.
Well, and then the other point that is somebody said about not having to do a study, but the study's been done, right? They're just leveraging the study that they already did. So it's not, and it is going to make it a more useful position so that it's longer, right?
Carol Mattoon, do you still have a question or a new question, or has your hand just been up all day?
No, I have a new question,
A new question. All right, go ahead.
and you might be the one to answer that. On the top of the survey, it says only complete surveys will be used to summarize the program planning survey results. So does that mean if you leave one of the questions empty, that they won't use your survey?
I noticed that Betsy Lawson has joined this group. Can we
Yeah, I
direct
don't know.
that to you?
Is Betsy was a longtime league staff person, now consulting with the National League. Betsy, would you like to answer that? You're still muted. Let's see, can I unmute you?
You can ask her to unmute.
I don't know.
I've
Can you
asked
hear
her.
me?
Yes, we can. That's good.
Okay. No, the answer is no. A completed survey. There are some, I mean, we prefer that you answer all questions, but no, everything that's submitted is counted.
Thank you. That
Not a
feels
problem.
reasonable and fair.
So what does that mean by a completed survey then?
It means if you don't hit submit, which is a problem we have had in the past.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That makes sense.
All right, we're about at an hour now since we began. So if there are people who would like to leave, we appreciate you coming today. And we do plan to send out a follow-up email, and it will include the link of this recording on the YouTube channel. And Beth has put that link in the chat. We'll also include the slide deck with the little bit of a script that we have. It will include perhaps the link to the page where all the concurrence materials are available on the New York site. And it will include an invitation if you'd like to join the national Google group and conference calls. We'll give you some information about that connects you between now and convention with what's going on. And then I'll just say all of us in Colorado are looking forward to seeing you in Denver in June. Hopefully things will come together that we all can meet. And meanwhile, I hope that there will be a lot of virtual opportunities also for caucuses and other conversations around the convention. So stay tuned to that. There is a link for a convention concurrence discussion group also that I would like to include.
Here in 1993 for 23 years now.
I would like to include that link too, so that if you have not seen that yet with the different concurrences that are being proposed from around the country, that will help prepare you and your local leagues to go and be informed ahead of the time. And also perhaps you'd like to include some of them on your response, your program response. So Judy and Barb have agreed to stay on for another 20 or 30 minutes. If you need to leave, have a good day. And if you'd like to stay, please do. All right, are there other questions here? Barb, Dungy, have we seen any others in the chat that maybe we could bring up now?
I got a direct message where someone said, so how different is this from the US position? And what I would say, it is additive. It is built on the US position, which in principle is really good. But it's 30 years later, so we are adding things that no one would have expected in 1990 when they started their study. So Mary has her hand up.
Yes, I have a question. Would the league support expanding access to healthcare in other ways before we can politically get to single payer? For instance, I'm a retired nurse, by the way. It seems to me like expanding Medicaid, we call it Medi-Cal here in California, and lowering the age for Medicare would be a faster way to get more people covered.
So which level league are you talking about?
Any league. I mean, with that, I'm not sure. I guess I'm not sure how it all works.
So what I would say is that, no, Barb's probably going to correct me, because what I know about the league is because the last 3 years of her mentoring. But my first reaction is Medicare is controlled by the federal government. If we want that to be extended, it is something that Congress has to do. Medicaid expansion to a large extent is in the states. That is where you advocate for it at the states. And then there are local things that you can advocate for. So yes, of course, we want to expand healthcare, geographically, by income, by marginalized status, by zip code. And part of what this concurrence does is give more ways to try to expand it in step back from the so positions allow you to have principles that allow you to score legislation. You don't write positions so that you can advocate for things. You write positions because they make sense, and then you look at the legislation and see if this legislation makes sense, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
So what you want is as robust a position as possible for the kinds of issues that leagues and legislators will be wrestling with. And I think one of the things this does is give you more ways to expand healthcare, including telemedicine and clinics in schools and home care. I mean,
Jan,
that's what we're looking for.
yeah. Jan, do you have a question? Jan Phillips.
I was just wondering if we're able to use any of the graphs you had in your presentation for letters to the editor or a brochure or anything we want to come up with for our league.
So some of those graphs are ours. Some of those graphs are from an organization known as PNHP, Physicians for a National Health Plan. And both league, and it is my understanding that if one league does it, other leagues can use it. And I know from PNHP that if you're using it for good, have at it.
Okay.
So yes, the answer to your question is use away.
All right. And Carol Mattoon?
Back to the question that was asked before that, as far as doing more piecemeal, not trying to get everything at once. When Medicare was passed originally under Johnson, I believe it was under Johnson, at that point, it was supposed to be everyone would be covered. And because they were having trouble getting it through Congress, well, they did it just for people 65 and over. And after that, piecemeal parts of that to make it better. They didn't think it was going to take over 50 years to actually get everybody covered, which we still haven't achieved that goal yet. So the league has piecemeal pieces in, the government has piecemeal parts in. However, you know, isn't it time for us to go for the gold? Olympians don't try to get the bronze medal, we try to get the gold medal. And so as much as we can get in, and having New York do this study, a 2-year study, is a super big deal. And to think that we're going to have another league do this or national do this, it's going to be another 10 years or so. So I really admire what New York has done. And I think we should try to go for the gold. And I'd like to have even more than we did, but I think this is really an excellent addition. And where someone had mentioned, well, you know, it's 500 words too much. There's no limit on how many words has to be in there. The best position that we can have so that all leagues can use it, I think is really advantageous.
Thank you, Carol. Are there other questions?
I want to say something about that. Although I obviously think it would be fantastic to actually have a good single payer system. I think that some of the other parts that we're adding through this, and like the telemedicine, like paying attention to disadvantaged populations, are things that we can use in terms of specific legislation, I would say pretty much at the state and the national level. I don't think we actually, maybe I'm just thinking from the New York point of view, but at the local level, we don't have any control over the rules for healthcare providers.
However, local control does have influence over public health. And some of our issues around disparate outcomes, disparate treatment, disparate access, disparate quality, those can allow bolstering of a local public health. So what I would say to people is the US League has its hands full right now. It has in fact advocated for a single payer. It has supported some of the bills in the past, but right now voting rights, this is a dumpster fire, and it's all hands on deck. But at the state and local level, we've got a lot more room, and I agree, we can expand. New York has, I think, expanded Medicaid more than any other state. Very expensive. But you know what? It means that the delta between New York going for single payer, which is what the New York Health Act does, and without all those taxes, it's a smaller delta to get there. And it means that our healthcare costs are high enough that when you look at it, you can see a real difference. So whether your state has expanded or not expanded healthcare and is closer or farther away from universal, think about what you can achieve. Look for legislators who will propose bills and get the right bills up.
I also was corresponding with Linda Hawkins in Louisiana this week, and they had expanded Medicaid in that state. But she's concerned now with their election of a new governor coming up in the fall, that may go by the boards. So I think that those of us that are in states where we are changing elected officials also can keep this in mind going forward and use our position to continue to strengthen if it's Medicaid where you are.
Yes, Medicaid is a good program. Karen has her hand up.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things that we can do at the local state level is begin a massive campaign of helping to educate our legislators. You know, I think they bought the Kool-Aid too, that somehow, Medicare for all is socialized medicine and nothing good can come from that. And I think there is adequate research that can be shared. Colorado and Linda Mahan, you have much more information on this, but a document has been developed in Colorado that refutes a lot of that. And if we could just get that information to our legislators and figure out some way to make sure that they actually read it and then have a conversation, the more people that you have that really understand what's happening now and how switching over can change the cost and the benefits to everybody, that might be another way of approaching this as well.
Exactly.
I'd just
I
like
do
to
think-
add that
Yeah.
speaking with your own local legislators and letting them know what you think and what is important to you is a really important thing. Even if you suspect that your legislator agrees with you, they like to know that that you think the same way or that you support something. So I would encourage, and if we have this position, there are parts that you probably can use at a fairly local level.
I
And
agree with
certainly
Barb.
like
I agree with
letters
Barb.
to the editor.
What our legislators hear, they hear from a couple of very large, supposedly nonprofit health hospital corporations, which my daughter has now said she's never going to use again because she went in for a test of her throat, not COVID, and cost her $180 a week ago. And she said, how can a strep culture, how can a strep culture cost $180? Well, and then she saw some reviews that said this particular nonprofit hospital, which owns many of the hospitals and many of the urgent care clinics and many of the, on the street doctors clinics, has enormous revenues, which they use for things other than shareholder value, but they don't use them as a nonprofit would. So I agree with Barb. Those are the ones who are talking to our legislators. They need to hear from voters and the league about what we care about and why they are buying myths and drinking Kool-Aid that are not actually, do not have a basis in reality or facts.
Are
And
there
I
other
say that
questions?
knowing that, that there are groups in New York that will happily tell you that all the Canadians are coming to the US for healthcare and that Canadian doctors are coming to the US, when in fact, the exodus of doctors from the US to Canada is far, far higher. Example.
Linda?
Yeah. Do you
This
have a
is Betsy.
question, Betsy? Is it Betsy?
Not a question, just a comment. I mean, the number of organizations that lobby on healthcare in Washington, D.C. is phenomenal. And there are so many vested interests, whether you're talking about the hospitals or the doctors and the subsets of all the doctors groups. I remember attending a meeting on Capitol Hill back in the days of the Clinton healthcare plan, and there were 300 people in the room. So you cannot underestimate that. It's
Don't forget the insurance companies.
Yeah, so
Right.
I've heard
Don't
that
forget the pharmaceuticals.
pharmaceuticals have hire 5 lobbyists for every member of Congress every year. And the health insurers, it's 2 or 3 lobbyists for every member of Congress. Think how big the league's lobbying force would have to be just for healthcare to counter that.
Well, maybe then this is something that we need to do a better job of getting out to the American public. How much money is being spent to maintain a system that is broken and is costing us way more than what we are getting in return for our investment? that has nothing to do with healthcare. You know, television advertising for pharmaceuticals, massive marketing, large dividends for healthcare, for people who invest in healthcare. None of that money goes into actual healthcare provisions, making the American people healthier. I don't think probably most Americans realize how much money is spent on those things in order to maintain the status quo, so that those who are making excessively large amounts of money, including CEOs of insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies and others, you know, it's a heavy burden to take on, but I think that's part of it too, is education.
Yes, thank you.
So I want to thank Betsy for all her work when she is surrounded by hordes.
Yes. Fighting off those hundreds of other lobbyists on healthcare. I hope that you did see in the chat, she had put up earlier that the league has in the past lobbied for some healthcare for all legislation too.
And the National League has been very strong on supporting the ACA and expansions,
defending it,
which is, you know, not the whole ball of wax, but it's very important for everybody, really, because it improves our health.
Carol Mattoon, do you want to add another comment? Carol?
I think her hand may be up.
No, when we talk about education, it's really hard to get our message out there when you're fighting all the big money that's out there. The real answer here is campaign finance reform.
Mm-hmm.
That's the underlying problem there. And one of the, you know, everybody knows Christian Cinema right now. She has received, last I heard, and that was about a month ago, $750,000 from healthcare. So she's, that's influencing her decision right now on the whole filibuster and Build Back Better and all that. Is both Democrats and Republicans, including Nancy Pelosi, all of them are receiving such huge amount of money from the pharmaceutical, medical supply, whatever you want to call it, healthcare, that it's very difficult for us to get our message out.
Well, I think, Carol, to applaud you is also important, because you and some of your colleagues down there in Arizona have been doing a good job of opinion pieces in the papers and just letting the public know what kind of funding is going into their elected officials.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see any more hands. I'm sure those of us who care deeply about this could continue to chat away our Saturday on this, but maybe there's some other things you need to do, like get out and take a walk. So I think I'm going to go ahead and close this up for today, and hope that in the next week we can get out to you this powerful follow-up email with all kinds of links and ways that you can keep working on this. And then, as I said before, please do come to Denver in June, join the convention and meet us all in person. I think Barb and Judy have pretty much prepared their caucus material right here that we could see in June, and maybe it'll be virtual as well as in person. So I don't know, Beth, do you have any other closing remarks here before we close down? I think that the recording may have been off for a little while, Beth. I tried to record it again to the cloud. I'm not sure where to find that, but maybe you can help me.
You bet, no problem. Sorry about that. I lost internet for a minute.
All right. Well, then, thanks to you all for joining us today, and have a good weekend.
And thanks to Colorado for being
Thank
a real
you.
supporter.
Yes. Thanks to everybody who was here.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I'm gonna say goodbye, Judy, and we can chat about this after if we need to.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Excellent job, ladies. Thank you.